Hello everyone, and welcome. I know you can't sleep, so I'll help you do that with a soothing story. But before we get to the story, subscribe and tell me where you're getting this from. High above the Earth, 250 miles up, a spacecraft drifts silently through the vacuum of space, the International Space Station. The most expensive man-made object in human history. A marvel of engineering, orbiting the planet every 90 minutes at 17,500 miles per hour, but for all its wonder, it's not a place built for comfort. Outside the station, temperatures can swing from minus 100 degrees Celsius to over 120 degrees in direct sunlight. Inside, the only thing standing between survival and disaster is a fragile balance of systems. Air pressure, humidity, oxygen levels, heat, and every one of those systems is controlled by software. Tonight, someone halfway across the world has just gotten access to that software. Not a foreign spy. Not a terrorist. But a kid. A teenager, sitting alone in his bedroom in South Florida. He calls himself Comrade. This isn't science fiction. It's not the opening scene from a futuristic movie. It's something that actually happened, and the story behind it is even stranger than it sounds. Over the next few hours, you'll hear about the youngest person ever convicted of hacking the United States government. A boy who wasn't out to steal money or destroy systems, he was just curious. Too curious. And maybe, too talented for his own good. You'll follow his digital footprints into NASA's servers, into the Pentagon, and into a life that spiraled from quiet rebellion to tragedy. This is the story of Jonathan James. This is the kid who hacked the Pentagon. The International Space Station, ISS for short, is one of the most complex machines humans have ever built. A floating laboratory the size of a football field. A collaboration between NASA, Russia, Japan, Europe, and Canada. It circles the Earth every 90 minutes. Inside, astronauts live and work. They sleep, they eat, they carry out scientific experiments. And they rely entirely on systems to keep them alive. Among the most critical of those systems is the environmental control and life support system. It keeps the air breathable, the temperature just right, the humidity in check. If it fails, the station becomes unlivable. There are no hospitals in space. No emergency exits. No rescue missions. So when NASA noticed unusual activity inside one of its protected internal networks, one storing the source code for that very system, it was a worst-case scenario. Someone was inside. They traced the activity through layers of connections, across digital pathways and servers, until they found something unexpected, a quiet neighborhood in South Florida. Palm trees. Fences. A two-story house with a teenage boy inside. Inside that house was a computer. On that computer was NASA software worth $1.7 million, software designed to manage the life support systems of a spacecraft 250 miles above Earth. NASA acted quickly. They shut down their systems for nearly 3 weeks. The estimated cost, around $40,000 in damages. But the money wasn't the point. The real question was, what else had been compromised? The person responsible didn't fit the profile of an enemy. Not a foreign agent. Not a cyber terrorist. Just a 15-year-old boy. Online, he was known only as Comrade. Whoever he was, he had breached 13 separate NASA computers. He hadn't just accessed them, he'd downloaded the source code. The actual instructions that told the space station systems how to function. He didn't erase anything. He didn't plant malware. He didn't crash the system. In fact, in some cases, he left messages. Polite ones. Pointing out security flaws. Suggestions on how to patch them. To a trained eye, it looked less like sabotage and more like exploration. When federal investigators showed up at the boy's house, they found more than one computer. They took his Palm Pilot. A stack of CDs. Even a Star Trek novel. His name was Jonathan James, and he didn't deny what he'd done. He explained how he got in. What tools he used. Why he'd done it. In his own words, it was just about learning. He wanted to understand how software worked. And what better way to learn than by reading government code? He didn't think of himself as a criminal. He didn't want money. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was just curious, but the federal government saw it differently. Jonathan James had accessed software that controlled systems aboard the most important spacecraft ever launched, and that wasn't all he'd done. He had also breached another system, a far more sensitive one, the Pentagon. But before we go there, before we step into the depths of classified defense networks, let's take a step back. Let's go to where it all started. The year is 1989. Jonathan James is 6 years old. He's growing up in a quiet suburb outside of Miami. His dad is a computer programmer. The family has a computer, uncommon at the time. And from an early age, Jonathan is hooked. At first, it's games. Floppy disks. Pixelated adventures. But it doesn't take long before he starts wondering how those games work. What's behind them? What's under the surface? While other kids are outside riding bikes and playing tag, Jonathan is inside. Watching code scroll across a glowing screen, his parents worry. His dad installs parental control software. Jonathan breaks through it. He learns about programming languages. Starts reading manuals on C, the building block of many systems. He installs Linux on the family computer. Just to see if he can. No one asked him to. No one could stop him. His obsession grows. He spends long nights in front of the screen, arguing with his parents when they try to limit his time. Eventually, they take his computer away. Jonathan runs away. Says he won't come back unless they give it back. This is no longer just a hobby. It's a way of life. A compulsion. A calling. By the time he's 15, he's no longer just. By the time he's 15, he's no longer just exploring. He's hacking. He's slipping into systems not meant for the public. Networks with government seals and restricted access warnings. He goes by Comrade Online. It's not a name meant to scare anyone. It's just his alias. A digital mask. A symbol that he doesn't belong to any one group. Just the internet. He doesn't do it to cause chaos. He does it to prove that he can. He doesn't steal data. Doesn't post it online. Doesn't brag. Instead, sometimes he reaches out. Sends a quiet email. Hey, your system has a hole in it. Here's how I got in. Here's how to fix it. To him, it's like solving a puzzle. Climbing a digital mountain. Not to plant a flag, but because it's there. In the summer of 1999, Jonathan is looking for a new challenge. He chooses NASA, specifically, the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. He breaches 13 computers. This time, he downloads source code. He later says the code itself wasn't very good. That it wasn't worth $1.7 million. But to him, it was an education. He wanted to learn how real engineers wrote their programs. Of course, just downloading the source code didn't give him control of the ISS. But even so, it was a massive breach. NASA's response made that clear. Systems offline. Thousands of staff affected. Real-world consequences, and for Jonathan. This is just the beginning. 2 months later, he finds a new target, the Department of Defense. He targets a specific agency, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. The DTRA. It deals with nuclear, chemical, and biological threats. Jonathan gets in. He installs a backdoor. Intercepts over 3,000 internal messages. Retrieves employee passwords, some of them with access to military systems. It's still just a game to him, but to law enforcement, it's now something else entirely. The United States government considers Jonathan James not just a hacker, but a threat to national security, and soon, they come knocking. Before he became Comrade, before he hacked into NASA and the Pentagon, before the FBI knocked on his door and federal agents raided his house, Jonathan James was just a little boy. Quiet. Curious. Often misunderstood. His story doesn't begin in a courtroom or in a government file. It begins in a living room, in a suburban neighborhood, with an old beige computer, glowing softly in the dark. It's the late 1980s. South Florida. Heat rising off the pavement. Palm trees casting long shadows across driveways. Inside the James household, 6-year-old Jonathan is already captivated by something most kids his age don't even understand, the family computer. At first, it's simple. He plays games. Old school titles on floppy disks. Nothing special, but to Jonathan, it's not the gameplay that matters. It's what's behind it. The logic. The structure. The code. He doesn't just want to play the game. He wants to know how the game works. His father is a computer programmer. And at first, it's a point of connection. But that connection quickly becomes a point of concern. Jonathan spends too much time at the keyboard. He becomes withdrawn. Distracted in school. Tired in the mornings. Fixated. His parents try to intervene. They put time limits on his computer use. They install parental controls. They try to push him toward other interests. But Jonathan isn't like other kids. He's not looking for fun. He's looking for understanding. Online, he goes by the name Comrade. It's a simple alias. No profile picture. No real identity. Just a handle on an IRC channel, floating in the vast sea of the internet. He's part of the underground. The digital underground. A loose, informal, constantly shifting community of hackers and enthusiasts. Some are teenagers. Some are seasoned adults. Most are anonymous. They exchange vulnerabilities. Show off exploits. Laugh at the sloppy security of government websites and corporate networks. Jonathan doesn't talk much. But when he does, people listen. He's methodical. Clean. Precise. And unlike many others in the scene, he doesn't break things just to break them. He doesn't brag. Doesn't release viruses. Doesn't steal credit card numbers. He just slips into systems, looks around, and sometimes even leaves a note on his way out. Hey, your firewall has a hole in it. Here's how I got in. You should probably patch it. It's not malicious. Not personal. It's more like a test. A quiet test of whether the world is as secure as people think it is. The tougher the challenge, the more drawn he is to it, and by the summer of 1999, he's ready for something big, something that would prove, once and for all, what he's capable of. He sets his sights on NASA, not because he wants to sabotage anything, not because he wants fame or notoriety, but because he wants to read the code. Real, production-grade code written by some of the world's top engineers. To him, this is the best textbook money can't buy. He focuses on the Marshall Space Flight Center, located in Huntsville, Alabama. It takes time. Research. Careful probing. Eventually, he finds a way in, one computer. Then another. And another. 13 in total. He doesn't announce himself. Doesn't leave a trail. He simply accesses the servers, navigates the file structure, and locates what he's after. The source code for the ISS's environmental control systems. He downloads it. By official estimates, the software is worth $1.7 million. To Jonathan, it's not worth nearly that much. In an interview later, he'll say the code itself was messy. Sloppy. Not what he expected. But still valuable. It's how professionals write mission-critical software, and Jonathan wants to learn from it. When NASA discovers the intrusion, they shut everything down. It takes weeks to inspect the damage, secure the systems, and make sure nothing was compromised. They lose time, money, confidence, and somewhere in Florida, Jonathan moves on. He doesn't realize it yet, but he's already on the radar. They're watching, they're tracing the breadcrumbs, but for now, he's still free. Still curious. Still convinced that he hasn't done anything truly wrong. A few months later, he sets his sights even higher. He targets the Department of Defense, the Pentagon. This time, it's not just curiosity. It's a challenge. He breaches the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, a division responsible for analyzing and responding to threats involving nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. He gets into their network, installs a backdoor, intercepts over 3,000 internal emails. Many of them sensitive. Some classified. He retrieves 19 usernames and passwords, 10 of them belong to staff with access to military systems. Still, he doesn't sell the data. Doesn't leak it. Doesn't do anything with it. To him, it's just exploration. Just another system conquered, but to the United States government, it's something else entirely. A teenager has breached both NASA and the Pentagon, and they're about to knock on his door. In the next part, we'll follow what happens when the FBI arrives. How Jonathan is arrested, interrogated, and sentenced as the youngest person ever convicted of cybercrime in the United States, but for now, Jonathan doesn't know any of that, he's just a boy. Behind a screen. Thinking no one's watching, but they are, and soon, they'll come for him. Jonathan James has been pushing boundaries for years, testing limits, learning not from school, but from systems, complex, real-world systems, that were never meant to be touched by someone like him. At 15, most kids are worried about homework, curfews, maybe passing their driving test, but Jonathan is spending his nights inside secure government networks, reading their code like it's just another book from the library. And so far, no one stopped him. Online, in the underground circles of early internet hackers, he goes by a name, Comrade. It's not a threat. Not a symbol of allegiance to anything in particular. To him, it's just a name, simple. Neutral. A mask, but behind that alias is a mind sharper than most. Focused. Quiet, and, depending on who you ask, dangerous. Jonathan isn't what most people imagine when they think of a hacker. He's not sitting in a dark basement surrounded by glowing screens and wires. He doesn't have a hoodie. He's not in it for money, or for revenge, or to prove a political point. He's in it for the challenge. It's about finding holes in the walls people think are solid, breaking into places not to destroy, but just to see if he can, and then walking away. Sometimes, he even leaves behind a note, a digital fingerprint. Here's how I got in. You should fix this. No ransom. No threats, just curiosity, but as harmless as that might sound, curiosity, especially the kind that digs into federal systems, isn't treated gently. Jonathan is about to find that out the hard way. When he hacks into NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, it's a big deal, bigger than even he realized. He's downloaded source code, millions of dollars worth, according to NASA's estimate, software that controls critical parts of the International Space Station. It's not just a breach of security, it's a breach of confidence. Proof that even the most advanced agencies in the world can be outsmarted by a teenager in his bedroom. NASA goes into lockdown. NASA goes into lockdown, systems are taken offline for weeks, technicians dig through logs, backups, and recovery protocols trying to understand what was touched. And what might have been altered. They don't find damage, but they do find proof of access, and that's more than enough. They contact law enforcement, and the trail begins to form. Meanwhile, Jonathan is already moving on. The Pentagon is next, specifically, a division called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. It's a low-profile agency with a high-stakes job, monitoring threats from nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. Jonathan slips into their servers. How exactly he does it is never fully revealed. Not in the court documents, not in interviews, but he gets in. He plants a backdoor, an invisible tunnel that lets him come and go at will. He reads thousands of internal emails, intercepts real-time communications, harvests usernames and passwords, 19 in total. At least 10 of those accounts belong to people with access to classified systems. Still, Jonathan isn't trying to sell the data. He's not trying to leak it to a foreign power. He doesn't do anything with it. Except look, he's exploring, but from the government's perspective, that doesn't matter. Intentions are irrelevant, impact is everything, and the impact is this: a teenager now has access to data from two of the most secure agencies in the country. Jonathan, for his part, isn't panicking. In his mind, he hasn't done anything wrong, no damage, no theft, no harm. He's not erasing files, he's not crashing systems, he's not sending threats, and besides, he thinks How would they even find him? But they already are. Digital forensics teams are pulling clues from every connection, every IP address, every timestamp, every anomaly in the logs, and slowly, the pieces are falling into place. It starts with NASA's breach logs, then server activity in Virginia, then a trail that leads down through the internet's tangled infrastructure. All the way to a quiet suburb in South Florida, back to Jonathan's neighborhood, back to the house where a teenager is still up late, clicking through directories, writing code, and thinking that nobody knows what he's doing. It's January 2000, Jonathan has just turned 16, he's got multiple computers now, stacks of CDs, notebooks full of scribbled out code, a Palm Pilot that holds more than just calendar reminders. He's still in contact with other hackers, still active online. Still exploring. His room is filled with clutter, monitors, keyboards, scattered books, some about programming, some about science fiction. He's a huge fan of Star Trek. He dreams about space, about the future, about what's possible when technology and imagination collide. But that morning, his future takes a sharp turn. His mom walks into his room. She looks shaken. "Jonathan," she says, quietly, "the FBI is at the door." Within minutes, agents are inside, 5 computers are seized, CDs are catalogued, hard drives unplugged and bagged, his Palm Pilot, his notes, even his Star Trek book. They don't leave anything behind. They question him. He doesn't resist, he doesn't lie, he tells them the truth, explains what he did, how he did it. He's calm, even helpful. He says he wasn't trying to hurt anyone, he was just curious, just learning. He promises not to do it again. The agents leave, weeks go by, then months, and nothing happens. It's almost easy to believe that it's over, that maybe, just maybe, they've decided to let it go. He's only a kid, after all. But then, 3 months later, the charges come, and just like that, the story becomes national. Jonathan James, alias Comrade, is now the youngest person ever charged with violating U.S. cybercrime laws. He could be facing years in prison. If he were an adult, the sentence might have reached 10 years. But he's not, he's 16, and so the court does something different. Jonathan is placed under house arrest for 6 months, no computer access, no internet, no more late nights in front of the screen, and perhaps worst of all, he's required to write formal apology letters, one to NASA, one to the Department of Defense, a kind of public humiliation, wrapped in legal procedure, for a kid who's never really had friends, never been popular, never felt like he belonged. This stings more than anyone realizes. For the first time, the system he used to control has control over him, and he's not coping well. Later, during a routine check-in, Jonathan tests positive for drug use. It's a probation violation. This time, there are no second chances. He's sent to a juvenile detention center, 6 months, real time, real walls, real criminals, not code, not screens, not the abstract world he's used to. When he finally gets out, something is different. His father will say later that Jonathan came back changed, quieter, more withdrawn, less focused, as if something inside him had gone dim. He still says he regrets what he did, that it wasn't worth it, that the thrill didn't match the cost, and for a while, it looks like he's leaving that world behind, the hacking, the late nights, the quiet rebellion. But the world isn't quite finished with him. And in just a few short years, someone from Jonathan's past will reappear, a hacker far more dangerous, far more destructive, and very much still active. His name is Albert Gonzalez, and he's about to pull Jonathan back into a story he thought was over. Summer, 1999, South Florida. While most teenagers are spending their break hanging out at the mall or playing video games, Jonathan James is doing something different. Something quieter. Something far more dangerous. He's sitting alone in his bedroom, the glow of his monitor lighting up the walls, typing carefully into a terminal window. He's targeting NASA, specifically, the Marshall Space Flight Center, located in Huntsville, Alabama. To Jonathan, it's not just an institution, it's a symbol. An agency filled with some of the smartest engineers in the world. The people who put astronauts on the moon. The ones working to keep the International Space Station running smoothly 250 miles above the Earth. In Jonathan's mind, breaking into NASA isn't about politics, it isn't even really about hacking, it's about proving to himself that he can do it. It's about knowledge, and control, and challenge. The more secure the system, the more it pulls him in. The breach begins the way many do. He scans NASA's networks from a distance. He looks for outdated systems, unpatched vulnerabilities, misconfigured servers. He finds one. Then another. Soon, he's inside, not physically, of course, not with a badge or a keycard. He's inside through lines of code, backdoors, permissions left wide open, and one by one, Jonathan quietly makes his way through 13 different NASA computers. Each one, a step deeper into the infrastructure of the space agency. He doesn't announce himself, he doesn't deface any websites, there are no pop-ups, no ransom notes, no deleted files. What he's looking for is source code, not just any code. He's after something very specific, the environmental control software used aboard the International Space Station. It's the software responsible for maintaining temperature, air pressure, oxygen levels, humidity, all the things that make the station livable for the astronauts floating miles above the planet. He finds it, and he downloads it, line after line, file after file, copied onto his system, saved carefully. By the time he's done, he's holding software valued by NASA at $1.7 million. To the government, it's a serious breach. To Jonathan, it's homework. Later, when asked why he did it, he'd shrug. He said the code wasn't even that good. The only reason I was downloading the source code, he explained, was because I was studying C programming. What better way to learn than by reading software written by the government? To him, it was just education, just a better textbook, but NASA didn't see it that way. They discovered the breach soon after. Someone, somewhere, had downloaded source code for the most sensitive life support software on the ISS. They couldn't be sure whether anything had been changed, whether anything had been corrupted, whether anything might malfunction later, so they shut everything down. For 21 days, NASA's systems were offline. Engineers scrambled to check logs, verify integrity, and patch vulnerabilities. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a full-scale emergency. The cost of those 3 weeks: approximately $40,000, not including the hours, the manpower, the reputational damage, and all of it traced back to a teenager in South Florida. At this point, Jonathan still has no idea how much attention he's drawn. He's not on the run, he's not hiding, he's back on his computer, reading code, moving on, because for him, it was never about what he could get, it was always about what he could learn. But outside his small, cluttered bedroom, the investigation is moving fast. NASA reports the intrusion to federal authorities, the Department of Justice is informed, so is the FBI, and so is the Secret Service, which, unlike what the name suggests, isn't just tasked with guarding presidents. It also investigates cybercrime, especially when it involves threats to national security. They begin digging through IP logs, network traces, time stamps. They don't find destruction, but what they do find is almost worse, because sometimes, the most terrifying kind of attacker is the one who doesn't try to break anything. Jonathan's breach of NASA could have ended his story right there, if that had been the end of it. If he had stopped, walked away, it's possible his name would have faded quietly into some dusty report on cyber vulnerabilities. But he didn't stop. He wanted to test himself again. He wanted to go bigger, and he already had a new target in mind. In September of 1999, just 2 months after the NASA breach, Jonathan begins exploring systems tied to the Department of Defense. This time, his focus is on the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DTRA. This is not just another office building in Washington, it's the agency responsible for monitoring and responding to some of the most dangerous threats imaginable: nuclear weapons, biological attacks, chemical warfare. And Jonathan gets in. He gains access to a server located in Bellis, Virginia, installs a backdoor, a secret tunnel that allows him to re-enter the system at any time without detection. Once inside, he begins intercepting communications, more than 3,300 messages, sent between employees of the agency. He downloads them, reads them, sorts them. He also manages to retrieve 19 usernames and passwords. At least 10 of those belong to staff with access to actual military systems. Again, he doesn't do anything with the information, he doesn't leak it, doesn't sell it, doesn't threaten anyone, he just looks. To him, it's harmless exploration, but from the government's point of view, it's something very different. It's not just a kid poking around, it's a full-blown breach of national security. Investigators now have a clear profile. They know someone's accessing high-level systems, they know he's talented, they know he's quiet, and they suspect he's young, but what they don't yet know is that they're dealing with a teenager, just 16 years old, no formal training, no criminal background, just someone with too much time, too much talent, and too little supervision. Back in Florida, Jonathan has no idea that he's being traced. He's not encrypting everything, he's not covering every track, because in his mind, he doesn't need to, he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong, he's just exploring, learning, no harm done, but law enforcement doesn't see it that way. They're building a case, slowly, carefully, and soon, they'll be at his door. In the next part, we'll walk through the moment it all comes crashing down, the early morning knock, the agents in the hallway, the seizure of his equipment, and the moment Jonathan James, alias Comrade, becomes a national headline. But for now, he's still in his room, still reading code, still thinking he's invisible. He's not.